Welcome to John Carter Stories, why I've never been the kind of man who calls ahead, not once in 43 years of marriage. I love the way my Eleanor's eyes light up when she sees me walk through the door before she expects me. Even now, after all this time, she still runs to me like we are two people who just found each other. That look on her face, that pure and unguarded joy, it is worth more to me than anything I have ever owned. My name is Edward. I am 64 years old. I drove a ride share for a living after my body finally gave out from 30 years in construction. Carrying cement bags and climbing scaffolding will age a man faster than almost anything else on earth. And my knees were done long before I was ready to admit it. But I adapted. I always have. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end. And let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. Now, let me take you back to December 21st, for days before Christmas. It was a quiet afternoon in our coastal town, the kind of quiet that settles in before the holidays, when everyone is either already home or hurrying to get there. I had met my quota for the day by early afternoon, and something in my chest was just pulling me home, pulling me toward Eleanor and warm coffee, and the smell of whatever she had on the stove. I pulled up next to my friend Pete, another driver who always parks near the terminal between rides. He is one of those men who laughs easily and means it every time. Eddie, he called out, "It is barely 4 o'clock. I already made my numbers for the day, and my friend, I told him, tucking my phone into my shirt pocket, and I want to surprise my wife." Pete let out a big laugh. "Ha ha," slapping me on the back. 43 years married and still doing surprises. That is the way to do it. Eddie, that is the way to do it. I smiled and got into my car. A 2016 Nissan Versa, nothing fancy, but mine. I drove slowly through the streets, thinking about everything Eleanor and I had built together over 4 decades. Our house, small but solid, had taken us nearly 30 years to finish. I had laid every single brick myself. We had saved every dollar we could scrape together. Eleanor taking in laundry and ironing for other families, me working double shifts on any construction site that would have me. That house was not just walls and a roof. It was every sacrifice we had ever made, pressed into concrete and mortar and love. As I turned onto our street, something stopped me cold. There was a car I did not recognize parked in front of our house. A black Honda Civic, fairly new, and right beside it, my son Daniel's truck. Daniel was not supposed to be home until Christmas Eve, 3 days away. I parked half a block down the street and walked slowly toward the house. Something felt wrong. I could not explain it. It was just a feeling in the bottom of my stomach, the kind of man gets after enough years of hard living to know when something is off. As I got closer, I heard sounds coming from inside. Laughter, the clink of glasses, people talking over each other the way people do when they are celebrating something. And then I saw her. Eleanor was sitting alone on the small bench by the entrance with her head down and her shoulders shaking. My wife was crying. I moved without thinking, crossing the last few feet quickly and crouching down in front of her. "My love," I whispered, "what is wrong?" She looked up, startled, and for just a second I saw relief flood her face before fear replaced it. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Edward," she breathed, quickly wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. "I was not expecting you this early." "What is going on?" I asked, taking both her hands in mine. They were cold despite the afternoon warmth. "What happened?" She glanced nervously toward the half-open front door, for which the laughter and conversation continued to pour. And before she could answer, my son's voice cut through everything else. "Come on, Mom. Stop being like this. It is just one signature. Mr. Gerald and Mrs. Patricia came all the way here to help us with the paperwork. Gerald and Patricia, Daniel's in-laws, in my house, talking about paperwork, talking about signatures." A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. "What papers is he talking about?" I asked Eleanor, keeping my voice low. She squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt, and what I saw in her eyes was something I had never seen there in 43 years of marriage. It was fear, real, deep fear. "They arrived 2 hours ago," she said, her voice barely holding together. "Daniel, his wife Sandra, and her parents. They brought drinks. They made toasts. I thought it was just a holiday visit. But then she stopped. Footsteps were approaching the door from inside. I stood up quickly and stepped to the side, partially hidden by the porch column. The door swung open, and there was Daniel. My son is 36 years old, and he looks a great deal like I did at that age. But there has always been something in his eyes since he married into Sanders' family. Something I noticed and tried to ignore. A restlessness. A hunger for things he had not earned. "Mom," he said, "not yet seeing me. Stop making this so difficult. We just need you to sign the transfer and the power of attorney. Once that is done, everyone will feel better. The house will be safe with us instead of sitting with two people who are already getting old." I stepped out from behind the column. Daniel. He nearly stumbled backward. His face went from red to white in the space of a single second. "Dad." He blinked, looking past me toward the street, like he was calculating something. "I did not know you were here." "I can see that," I said. "How long have I been here?" I heard enough. His wife, Sandra, appeared behind him before he could say another word, wearing that smile of hers that never quite reaches her eyes. "Mr. Edward, what a lovely surprise," she said warmly, as though I had walked in on a birthday party rather than my wife being pressured to sign away our home. "We were just talking about you." And behind her, two more figures filled the doorway. Gerald Hartman, a thick, well-dressed man with a trim gray mustache and the kind of confidence that comes from spending too many years not being told no. And beside him, his wife, Patricia, thin and draped in jewelry that seemed too heavy for a frame, with dyed blonde hair and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Edward," Gerald said, extending his hand. "What a pleasure." I did not take it. "Daniel," I said, keeping my eyes on my son, "I asked you a question. What papers are you asking your mother to sign?" He exchanged a quick glance with his father-in-law. That look, that single wordless glance between them, told me everything I needed to know about who was running this operation. "Dad, it is nothing to worry about," Daniel started, and his voice had that particular smoothness people use when they're trying to sound reasonable while doing something unreasonable. "We are just thinking about the future. With your age, with the driving job, what happens if something goes wrong? If the house is protected under our names?" "Under your names," I repeated. "This house, the one I built with my own two hands. The one your mother and I paid for across 40 years. "Mr. Edward," Gerald stepped forward, his tone shifting into something condescending that made my hands tighten at my sides. "I think there may be a misunderstanding here. We are simply trying to protect family assets. I have connections with some very important people who can ensure everything is properly arranged." "Everything is already properly arranged," I said. "I have the deed. Every document is in order. I do not need anyone's protection for what already belongs to me." "Dad." "You are being stubborn," Daniel said, and I could tell from the brightness in his eyes and the slight unevenness in his stance that he had been drinking. "You cannot drive forever. What happens when the work dries up? How do you keep the house then?" I felt Eleanor's hand settle gently on my arm. A quiet signal. "Stay calm. Edward, please stay calm. Your mother and I planned for our retirement years ago," I said. "We have savings. I have my pension. The house is paid off. We do not need rescuing." What happened next unfolded like water finding the cracks in stone. Gerald kept talking. Patricia kept smiling. Sandra kept filming on her phone, though I did not catch that until later. And the whole time, Eleanor stood beside me, her hand on my arm, her eyes cast down in a way that made something crack quietly inside my chest. They had been at this for 2 hours before I arrived. 2 hours of toasts and warm words slowly curdling into pressure, working on my wife alone, wearing her down, waiting for the moment she would just sign. "Nobody is signing anything," I said, and this time my voice carried the full weight of everything I felt. "And I am asking all of you to leave my home. Right now." The friendly expressions fell away like masks at the end of a party. Gerald straightened. A thin smile crossed his face. "I think you may regret this decision, Mr. Edward. We were offering you something generous. Think it over when you are calmer." He gestured toward the door. "Family, let's go." Daniel stayed a moment longer. He looked at me, and underneath the anger I saw something else. Something younger. Something that looked almost like shame. "Dad, I was only trying to help." If you want to help us, I said quietly, start by respecting what we built. They collected their things and filed out. I waited until I heard both vehicles start and pull away down the street. Then I turned to Eleanor. Did you sign anything? I asked, taking her face gently in my hands. Anything at all? She shook her head. No, but Arthur, they were so insistent. They told me it was the safest thing. That without this protection, we could lose everything if something happened to you. Her voice broke apart. For a moment, I almost believed them. I held her against my chest and felt her shaking slowly calm. And I made her a promise, quietly, into her hair, that no one would ever make her cry like that again in her own home, not even our own son. A few minutes after their cars disappeared, I went back inside. On the kitchen table were the half-finished drinks they had left behind, and beside them, a small stack of papers. I picked them up. My heart dropped straight through the floor. They were drafts of a property transfer and a power of attorney, already printed on a notary's letterhead, already formatted, already filled in with our names and our address. They had this plan before they ever knocked on our door. Eleanor, I said softly, showing her. She looked at the papers and then looked at me, and the fear in her face was the deepest I had ever seen. Arthur, she whispered, I am scared. The way they spoke to us, as if we were two useless old people with no right to decide anything for ourselves anymore. I set the papers down on the table and put my arms around her, but my mind was already moving, already calculating, already building the first walls of whatever came next. Do not worry, my love, I told her. I will not let anyone take what is ours. I meant every word. That night, while Eleanor slept fitfully beside me, I lay in the dark with my eyes open and thought about two people. An old friend named Captain Frank Morales, who now worked for the city police, and a young lawyer named Angela Reeves, who would help a fellow driver out of a situation not entirely unlike this one. I would call them both before the sun came up. This fight had just started, and I had no intention of losing it. Stay with me, because in part 2, I'm going to tell you what I found out about my own wife's signature, what was already registered behind our backs, and the moment I realized just how deep this had already gone. I barely slept that night. While Eleanor breathed restlessly beside me, my mind would not stop replaying everything. The image of my wife crying alone on that bench outside our own front door, while laughter floated from inside our house, it burned to me like something that would not go out. I got up before dawn and made coffee, sat at our small kitchen table with the hot cup in my hands, and called my friend Pete. Eddie, he answered, half asleep and confused. It is barely 5 in the morning. What is wrong? I need you to cover my rides today. I told him. Something urgent has come up. A short silence on his end. Is everything all right with Mrs. Eleanor? I will explain everything later. I said, I owe you one, Pete. After I hung up, I felt Eleanor's hands settle on my shoulders from behind. I had not heard her get up. Where are you going so early? She asked softly, pouring herself a cup. To make sure no one takes what is ours, I said, taking her hand. Trust me, my love. She looked at me for a long moment with those steady eyes of hers, the eyes that after 43 years could still read every thought in my head before I had finished thinking it. Be careful, Edward, she said finally. I know that look. I kissed her forehead and I left. My first stop was a municipal police station. The building was just waking up when I arrived, a young officer finishing his night shift, another one starting his morning. Captain Frank Morales was just walking in from the parking lot when I got there. Frank and I had grown up in the same neighborhood. He went into the police academy. I went into construction. Life brought us back together years later, when our kids ended up in the same school, and a friendship from boyhood picked up right where it had left off. Edward, he said, reading my face before I said a word. Come inside. I just made coffee. I told him everything in his small office, every detail. From the moment I had parked half a block from my own house to finding those pre-printed notary documents on my kitchen table. Frank's expression hardened as I talked. I know Gerald Hartman, he said when I finished, leaning back in his chair. He plays a successful businessman in this town, but he has a history of taking advantage of people, mostly older folks. And your son, he paused, looking at me carefully. I am sorry to say this. Edward, Daniel has always gone looking for the shortcut. I am not surprised he ended up in Hartman's orbit. I was not offended. Frank had always been honest with me, and that was why I trusted him. What can you actually do, Martin? I asked. I am worried they will come back when I am not home. He rubbed his jaw. Legally, I cannot act until a crime has been committed, he admitted, but I can have patrols pass by your house more often. And if anything happens, you call me directly, day or night. I thanked him and stood up, but I already knew I needed more than patrols. I needed legal arm around our home. Do you know a lawyer named Angela Reeves? I asked. He nodded. She is good, sharp, has helped a few people with property issues. Her office is near the market. I headed straight there. The lights in her office were already on despite the early hour. I knocked on the frosted glass door, and a clear young voice invited me in. Angela Reeves was younger than I expected, probably early 30s. She wore a simple professional jacket, and her dark hair was pinned back neatly. Her eyes behind thin-framed glasses studied me with a calm intelligence that immediately put me at ease. "How can I help you?" she asked, pointing to the chair across from her desk. I talked for 30 minutes without stopping. She listened without interrupting once, making notes and careful, even handwriting on a legal pad. When I finished, she set her pen down and looked at me. "Mr. Edward, what you are describing is unfortunately not unusual," she said. "Adult children or outside parties pressuring elderly parents to transfer assets, sometimes through deception, sometimes through sustained emotional pressure, sometimes both. What can I do to protect us?" I asked. "Several things," she said, putting her glasses back on. "First, I need to review all your existing documents. Do you have a will?" "I made one about 10 years ago." I told her, "Daniel is our only child. We left him as sole heir. We need to change that immediately," she said, and her tone left no room for argument. "And we need to revoke any power of attorney your son might currently hold." "Power of attorney," I said slowly. "We never gave him any power of attorney." Angela looked at me very directly. "Are you completely certain of that?" The question hit me like cold water. "Sometimes documents get signed in moments of confusion," she said carefully. "Or people sign something believing it is something else entirely. Is it possible your wife signed something without fully understanding what it was?" I wanted to say no, but I thought about Eleanor and her complete trust in people she loved. I thought about how easily Daniel could have slipped something in front of her with a gentle explanation and a warm smile. "I cannot be completely certain," I admitted. Angela picked up her phone. "I know every notary in this town. I am going to ask them to check whether any power of attorney exists in your son or daughter-in-law's name." For the next 2 hours, while she made calls and drafted documents, I sat across from her and provided everything she needed. The house, our savings, a small plot of land on the outskirts of town we had bought years ago for retirement. Then her phone rang. She answered, and her expression changed. She listened without speaking for almost a full minute. When she hung up, she looked at me, and I knew before she said a word. "We have a problem, Mr. Edward. The notary, Mr. Vicente, has confirmed that a general power of attorney was registered 6 months ago in favor of your son Daniel. Signed, according to his records, by Mrs. Eleanor." I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. "That is impossible," I said. "Eleanor would never do that without telling me." Angela kept her voice steady. "The notary says the signature appears authentic. But," she paused, "Mr. Edward, is it possible someone forged your wife's signature? Or had her sign a document while making her believe it was something routine?" I sat very still for a moment, and then something surfaced in my memory that I had not thought about in months. A day about 6 months ago when Daniel had stopped by during a weekday when I was out on the road. He had told Eleanor he needed her signature on what he called an insurance form related to the house. Eleanor had mentioned it to me that evening, casually, and I had not thought twice about it. My stomach turned over. They had used her love for her son against her. Angela was already drafting the revocation before I finished explaining. We spent the rest of that morning moving from one notary's office to another, formalizing the revocation of the power of attorney and establishing a protective trust around our home. We changed the will as well, adding clear language stating that any evidence of coercion or manipulation would automatically disqualify Daniel as an heir. By the time we finished, it was nearly noon. Angela handed me a thick folder of copies. "Keep these somewhere safe," she told me. "Carry copies with you when you leave the house. And Mr. Edward, one more thing." She showed me how to set up a recording app on my cell phone, how to activate it quickly and quietly. "We are in a one-party consent state," she explained. "You can legally record any conversation you're a part of. If they come to you again, you need everything on record." I walked out of her office feeling simultaneously stronger and sadder than I had in years. I had never imagined I would need a lawyer to protect myself from my own child. As I drove home, my phone rang. "Eleanor." "Edward," she said, and I heard the tension before she even finished my name. "Daniel just called. He says he is coming over with Gerald. He says they have something important to show us. Do not open the door for them." I said immediately, "I am on my way. 10 minutes. I already told him Mr. Sampson is here fixing the lock," she said. I almost laughed despite myself. Mr. Sampson was our neighborhood locksmith, a big, calm, well-respected man. Eleanor had invented him on the spot to buy herself time. My Eleanor, sharper than anyone ever gave her credit for. I drove home as fast as I legally could. Before I got out of the car, I activated the recording app on my phone and slipped it into my shirt pocket. The front door was unlocked when I walked in. I entered quietly. Daniel was at the kitchen table with Gerald. Papers spread out between them, Amber filming with her phone in the corner. Eleanor stood near the kitchen doorway, visibly uncomfortable. "Dad," Daniel said, standing up when he saw me. "Good, you are here. We were just going over some new arrangements with Mom." "Arrangements," I repeated, walking over to Eleanor and taking her hand. It was cold. "Mr. Edward," Gerald said, spreading his hands in that wide, generous gesture of his. "I think there was some misunderstanding yesterday. We are not here to take anything. We are here to protect you. There are people who prey on elderly homeowners, scammers, developers, sometimes even the government. If your home is held under a properly structured corporation." "Let me see those papers," I said. He pushed them toward me almost eagerly. I looked them over. It was a sales contract dressed up as asset protection, with clauses buried in the language that would have handed them total control of our property within 18 months. A lawyer friend prepared this. Gerald said proudly. He manages assets for several prominent families in the state. I set the papers back down on the table. "And you support this fully," I said to Daniel. He straightened up. "Of course, Dad. It is a smart move. And actually, Gerald has offered me a position in his company if we finalize things. A real position with a real salary." There it was. The whole reason. Not concern for his parents. A job. An easy paycheck handed to him by his father-in-law in exchange for delivering our home. "Nathan," I said, and I used the name quietly. "How long have you been out of work now?" His face darkened. "I am between things, Dad. I have been helping Gerald with some projects." "What kind of projects?" I pressed. "Real estate mainly," Gerald answered before Daniel could. "There's a great deal of potential in this area. Neighborhoods like this one are appreciating fast." And that was the last piece I needed. They were not just after our house for a loan or a quick asset grab. They were planning to eventually sell it to developers. Our neighborhood was starting to attract outside money, and our house sat right in the middle of it. "I understand completely," I said, and I let my voice warm just slightly, just enough. Both Gerald and Daniel visibly relaxed. Gerald almost smiled. "In fact," I continued, "I spent this morning doing exactly what you are suggesting, legally protecting what is ours." I opened the folder Angela had given me and laid the documents on the table. "This morning, Eleanor and I placed our home into an irrevocable trust," I said, "and we revoked the power of attorney my wife apparently signed 6 months ago on what she believed was an insurance form. Our attorney is handling everything, including a formal complaint about the signature." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the refrigerator running. Daniel's face went blank. Gerald went very still. "What have you done?" my son said, barely above a whisper. "What I had to," I replied. and every word of this conversation is being recorded. I took my phone from my pocket and held it up. Gerald stood abruptly, gathering his papers with the controlled movements of a man trying very hard not to show what he was feeling. "You are making a serious mistake, Mr. Edward. I have connections everywhere. Your little lawyer is going to discover that soon enough. Your threats are also recorded," I said. He left without another word. Daniel stayed for a moment, looking at me with an expression I still cannot fully name. "I never thought you would distrust me this way," he said. "I am your son. And precisely because you are my son," I replied, "this hurts me. But I will not allow it. Not for your sake, and not for ours." When they finally left, Eleanor came to me and wrapped her arms around my chest. She did not say anything for a long time. She just held on. I looked out the window and watched Daniel and Gerald talking heatedly next to their vehicles before they drove away. Daniel was gesturing with both hands. Gerald had his arms crossed, giving instructions in that flat, patient way of someone who believes they still have more moves to play. I was certain he was right. This was not over. Not even close. Part 3 is coming, and I need you to be ready, because what they tried next was something I never could have predicted, and it put Eleanor in real danger. I called Mr. Sampson that same night. He answered on the second ring, and I could hear the television in his background. The real Mr. Sampson this time, not Eleanor's cleverly invented one. "Eddie," he said, "is everything all right over there? I need you to change all the locks tonight." I told him, "I know it is late. I would not ask if it were not urgent." A moment of quiet. Then, without any drama, "I will be there in an hour." That was Mr. Sampson, a man of the old kind. Large, rough hands, surgeon's precision, and no unnecessary words. While he worked on our front door, I sat at the kitchen table with Eleanor and told her everything. About the notary, about the forged power of attorney, about Angela's documents and the trust and the recording. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I remember that day," she said finally, "6 months ago. Daniel stopped by while you were working. He had papers. He said it was something for the house insurance. He sat with me at this very table. I signed it without even putting my glasses on." Her voice cracked on the last sentence, and I reached across and took her hand. "It is not your fault," I said. "Not one bit of it." She shook her head slowly. "I should have called you first. I just never imagined." "None of us imagined," I said. Mr. Sampson came in from the hallway, holding 3 sets of new keys. "One for each of you, and keep the third hidden somewhere only you two know about," he said. And then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something that surprised me completely. Small cameras, no bigger than my thumb. I install these at the entrance and at the back. They connect to your phones. If anyone steps onto this property, you both get an alert within seconds. "Mr. Sampson, where did you get those?" He shrugged. "A friend brings them in. Good quality. I will leave them as part of the job." We paid him and thanked him and watched him drive away into the quiet night. Then Eleanor and I sat in the living room, and for a while neither of us said anything. The house held its familiar silence around us, the small particular sounds of it settling, the clock on the wall, the distant sound of the ocean several streets away. "How did we get here?" Eleanor said softly. "We raised him as well as we knew how." "I know, my love. Do you think the Hartmans changed him?" she asked. "Or did they just bring something forward that was already there?" I had no answer for that. I am not sure I will ever have one. The next morning I went back to work. We needed the routine. We needed the income. And I needed them to believe nothing had changed, that we were two unsuspecting old people going about our days. It was a quiet shift. I picked up a family from the airport, drove a group of tourists to the main beach, ended the afternoon with a long trip to the next town over. By the time I was heading back, it was getting dark, and I was thinking about dinner, and Eleanor and the leftover soup she had mentioned that morning. And then my phone buzzed. A camera alert. I opened the app while stopped at a red light, and what I saw made my blood go cold. Sandra, Daniel's wife, was at our front door. She was not alone. A woman with a professional briefcase stood beside her, and a man on her other side, who was holding what looked like a clipboard. I called home immediately. Eleanor picked up before the second ring. Edward, where are you? Near the house. I see Sandra at the door with 2 people. Who are they? Her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. She says they are a social worker and a doctor. She says Daniel sent them because he is worried about our mental state, that we need to be evaluated to confirm we can still manage our own affairs. The air went out of me for just a moment. Do not open that door, I told her. Not for any reason. Have you called Angela? I already did. She told me not to let them in, and that she is on her way. I felt something that might have been a smile if the situation had been any less serious. Eleanor had moved faster than I had. She had the attorney's number memorized. She was already ahead of them. I am 5 minutes away. I told her, stay on the line if you can. I also called Captain Frank Morales as I drove. He answered on the first ring. Frank, there are people at my house claiming to be a social worker and a doctor. No appointment. No prior contact from us. I believe my son arranged this. I am already moving, he said. Do not do anything until I get there. But I could not just sit in the car around the corner. I got out and moved toward the house on foot, staying close to the hedges, close to the shadows between the street lights. Sandra was still at the door when I got close enough to hear. Her voice had gone from firm to pleading. Mrs. Eleanor, we know you are in there. Please, we only want to help you. If you do not open this door, we will have to contact the authorities ourselves. The man beside her was filming everything on his phone, creating evidence, documenting our non-cooperation, so they could present it later as proof of confusion, of paranoia, of incapacity. I stepped out of the shadow. Would someone like to explain to me what is happening on my property? The 3 of them turned at once. Sandra recovered fastest. She always did. Mr. Edward, what good timing. This is Ms. Brenda Torres, a social worker, and Dr. Villanueva. They are here for a routine wellness check. Daniel arranged it because he's been so concerned. Concerned, I repeated. A routine wellness check arranged without our knowledge or consent. What organization do you work for? The woman calling herself a social worker hesitated just long enough. We work with a private assistance program. She said, your son contracted us. Then you have no legal authority to be here. I said, you are on private property without an invitation. I am asking you to leave. The man spoke up then. Mr. Edward, we only need a few minutes. It is a simple evaluation. Standard practice for people in your age group. I want to see your medical license. I said to him directly, right now. He shifted his weight. It is in the car. I could just. That will not be necessary. Angela Reeves came around the corner with her briefcase in hand, and Captain Frank Morales 2 steps behind her with another officer. Angela's voice was sharp and clear and left absolutely no room for misunderstanding. Ms. Torres, Dr. Villanueva, you are currently in violation of multiple statutes, including impersonation of public health officials and harassment of private citizens. I strongly recommend you stop speaking without an attorney present. The fake social worker's composure cracked like old paint. Captain Morales stepped forward. I am going to need all 3 of you to accompany me to verify your identities and credentials. Sandra started to say something. Frank looked at her with an expression that stopped the words in her throat. They went with the officers, quietly. Angela walked with me to the front door, and I let us both in. Eleanor was standing in the hallway, pale but upright, her phone in her hand. Angela went straight to her. Mrs. Eleanor, are you all right? I am all right, Eleanor said. I did not open the door. I just kept waiting and calling. Angela turned to me. Mr. Edward, this tells us exactly where they are heading. The house, the trust, the revoked power of attorney. Those approaches have failed. So now they are trying to build a case that you are mentally unfit to manage your own affairs. If they can establish that legally, they can petition for guardianship and everything changes. What do we do? I asked. Tomorrow morning, first thing, we get you both evaluated by a legitimate geriatric physician and a forensic psychologist. Their reports will be our shield if this ever reaches a courtroom. That night, after Angela left and Frank's patrol car had passed the house twice, Eleanor and I sat at our kitchen table together, just the 2 of us in the familiar warmth of our kitchen. She made tea. I watched her move around the space she had filled with 30 years of small, careful love. The curtain she had sewn herself, the painted tiles above the stove, the photographs arranged just so on the windowsill. They want to take this from us, she said quietly, wrapping both hands around her cup. They will not, I said. She looked up at me. How can you be so certain? Because they underestimated us. I told her. They thought they were dealing with two tired old people who would sign anything put in front of them. They have no idea who they are dealing with. Eleanor looked at me for a long moment, and then, so quietly I almost missed it, she smiled. And in part 4, I'm going to tell you what happened when they came back one final time, what they did to Eleanor when I was not home, and the moment the whole thing unraveled in a way even I did not see coming. The weeks after that felt like walking through a minefield in the dark. Quiet on the surface, dangerous underneath. We heard nothing from Daniel or the Hartmans, and that silence, rather than reassuring us, kept us both on edge. Captain Morales had told me once, when your enemy goes quiet, that is exactly when you should be the most alert. I had not forgotten it. We kept to our routines. I drove my morning shifts. Eleanor ran her errands and kept the house. We went to see the geriatric physician and the forensic psychologist that Angela had arranged, two careful and thorough professionals who spent several hours with us separately and together. Both confirmed, clearly and in writing, that we were in full possession of our mental faculties and fully capable of managing our own affairs. I brought copies of those reports home and put them in the same folder as the trust documents. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, Angela called me while I was between rides. Mr. Edward, we have good news on the forgery complaint, she said. The notary, Mr. Vicente, has formally admitted that the signature on the power of attorney was not properly verified, and a handwriting expert we retained has confirmed it does not match Mrs. Eleanor's authentic signature. The document is definitively nullified, and the forgery complaint is moving forward. The judge has summoned Daniel to testify next week. I sat in my parked car and let that wash over me. Good news, yes, but I also knew what it meant. Daniel, legally cornered, would be desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. That same afternoon, I was on the far side of town finishing my last ride when my phone buzzed. Not a call, a camera alert. I opened the app. My heart stopped. Daniel was at our front door. Sandra was with him, and a third person I did not recognize, a man in a white coat carrying a small bag. I called Eleanor. She did not pick up. I called again. Nothing. I canceled the rest of my shift and drove home as fast as I could without breaking traffic laws, calling Captain Morales as I went. Frank, they are in my house. Daniel, Sandra, and someone I do not recognize. Eleanor is not answering her phone. I am on my way, he said. Edward, wait for me. Do not go in alone. I parked a block away and approached on foot. The front door was unlocked when I tried it. I pushed it open and stepped inside as quietly as I could. What I saw in my living room turned my stomach completely over. Eleanor was sitting on the sofa with a glassy, unfocused look in her eyes. Her hands were folded in her lap in a way that was wrong, too still, too careful. Sandra was filming from the corner. The man in the white coat was taking Eleanor's blood pressure with a practiced efficiency that made my skin crawl. And Daniel was standing in the middle of the room talking to Sandra's camera, gesturing toward his mother. As you can see, my son was saying to the lens, my mother is in no condition to be making major decisions on her own. She needs supervision. What is happening in this house? My voice came out louder than I intended. All three of them spun toward me. Eleanor's head turned slowly, and when her eyes found mine, something behind them shifted, relief moving through whatever fog they had put her in. Edward, she said, and my name in her mouth sounded like someone surfacing for air. Dad, Daniel said quickly, we were not expecting you back yet. We are just doing a health check on Mom. She has seemed very confused lately. What did you give her? I said, and it was not a question. The man in the white coat stepped back from Eleanor. It is just a mild sedative, he said, his voice already uncertain. She was agitated when we arrived. I just gave her something to calm her down. Without her consent, I said, without a doctor's appointment, without anything. They tricked me. Edward, Eleanor said. Her voice was slow, but clear underneath the fog. They called and said you had been in an accident, that you were at the hospital. When I opened the door, Sandra was still filming. I walked toward her. Turn that off. She raised her chin. It is for documentation, to show Mrs. Eleanor's condition. Tell me exactly what you gave my wife. I said to the man in the white coat. Your name, your license number, your hospital affiliation. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a small bottle with shaking hand. It is a mild anti-anxiety medication, he said. Common compound. It will wear off in a few hours. I am Dr. I pocketed the bottle. You are leaving now, I said. All three of you. Daniel stepped toward me. Dad, we called social services before we came. We explained that you two were not coping. They are coming. When they see the state mom is in. He did not finish his sentence because Captain Frank Morales came to the front door at that exact moment with two officers, and Angela Reeves one step behind him. Angela crossed the room to Eleanor immediately, dropping to her knees in front of the sofa, taking her hands. Mrs. Eleanor, can you hear me clearly? Are you in pain? I am all right, Eleanor murmured. Just slow. My head feels like cotton. Frank was already moving toward the man in the white coat. Sir, I need your name, your medical license, and your identification. Right now. The man's composure collapsed entirely. I am not a doctor, he said, and his voice broke in the middle of the sentence. They hired me. I am an actor. I do local commercials. They paid me to play a doctor. They told me it was a family matter, and there will be no consequences. Daniel exploded. What are you doing? Shut your mouth. The actor kept talking. He was terrified, and fear makes people honest. They gave me a script, told me exactly what to say, exactly what to examine, what to conclude. They said the lady just needed a little help looking confused for the camera. Frank looked at Daniel, then at Sandra, then at the actor. All three of you, he said quietly, you are coming to the station. And then something happened that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. My son, standing in the middle of the living room with handcuffs about to be placed on his wrists, looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not anger, not calculation, not the smooth false concern he had been wearing for months. Something raw, something young, something that looked, underneath all the wreckage, like the boy he had once been. Dad, he said. His voice broke apart on the second word. Dad, please. You have to understand. Gerald got me into this. He told me that if I did not deliver the house, he would take everything back. The job offer, the money he had already given me. He said he had connections and he would ruin me. I did not know how to get out. I owe him so much. I am so desperate. I stood very still. And your answer was to drug your mother, I said. To use her love for you as a door to walk through. He had no answer for that. What answer could there possibly be? Captain Morales led them out. I watched my son walk to my front door in handcuffs and felt something in my chest that I cannot put a clean name on. It was not satisfaction. It was not relief. It was something older and heavier than both of those things together. Angela stayed with us while a real doctor examined Eleanor. The sedative was relatively harmless, and within the hour she was herself again, a little tired, a little pale, but her eyes were clear and her voice was steady, and her hand in mine was warm. When the doctor left and the house was quiet again, Angela sat across from us at the kitchen table. Mr. Edward, Mrs. Eleanor, she said, what happened today is serious. We are no longer in the territory of a family property dispute, administering medication without consent, impersonating medical professionals, entering a home under false pretenses. These are criminal charges. The question is what you want to do with them. Eleanor and I looked at each other for a long moment. We do not want Daniel in prison, Eleanor said. Angela nodded slowly. I understand, but without consequences. There will be consequences, I said. There will be real ones. Just not that one. That night I sat in the chair beside our bed and watched Eleanor sleep, her breathing steady and soft in the dark. And I thought about everything. About the boy who used to fall asleep in this house, in the room down the hall, about the man he had become and the choices that had led us all here, and about the conversation I needed to have with him in the morning. Part 5 is the last part. It is where I tell you what I said to Daniel in that station room, what the judge decided, what happened to Gerald Hartman, and where all of us ended up on the other side of the hardest year of our lives. The next morning, Eleanor and I sat at our kitchen table before sunrise and talked for a long time about Daniel, about what we wanted, about the difference between punishment and consequence, and about whether love and justice could exist in the same sentence. We have to be honest with ourselves. Eleanor said, if there are no real consequences, they will try again. But prison, she stopped. He is still our son. Edward. I know, I said. I know. We called Angela before 8 o'clock and asked her to meet us at the station. Captain Morales was waiting when we arrived. He informed us that Daniel, Sandra, and the actor were still in custody. Gerald and Patricia Hartman had been located and questioned, but were currently free. We have decided how we want to proceed. I told Frank and Angela when we sat in his office. Tell me, Angela said. Eleanor took my hand, and I laid out our terms. Daniel must completely and permanently separate himself from the Hartmans. If that meant ending his marriage to Sandra, then that was a price. He would need to find honest work and support himself for the first time in his adult life. He would need to testify fully and truthfully against Gerald Hartman and provide everything he knew about the forgery, the planning, all of it. And as long as he demonstrated through actions over time that he was a different man, we would not press criminal charges for what had happened in our home. Angela looked at me carefully. And the Hartmans? We want to proceed fully against them. Eleanor said firmly, Gerald Hartman is the architect of all of this. He brought our son into his schemes. He pressured him. He used him. We want him to face what he has done. Angela and Frank exchanged a look. Without Daniel's testimony, Frank said, it will be difficult to build a full case against Hartman. His attorneys will work to distance him from everything that happened. He will testify, I said. I will talk to him. An hour later, I was sitting across a small table from my son in a room at the station. He looked diminished, like something had gone out of him. The dark circles under his eyes were deep and his hands were folded on the table like a man in a church pew. He started to speak as soon as he saw me. Dad, Listen first, I said. I told him our decision. Every word of it. The conditions. The expectations. The one and only chance. He was quiet for a long time when I finished. You are not pressing charges, he said slowly. Not if you do exactly what I have described. And not if you testify fully against Gerald Hartman. Dad, he said, and his voice had gone very small. If I testify against him, he will come after me. He has connections everywhere. Then you will have to be brave for the first time. I said, and Daniel, I want you to hear me clearly. This is the last door I am opening. If you walk through it and you use it, if you show us with time and with actions that you have understood what you have done and that you are choosing differently, then we will talk about forgiveness. But that conversation happens later, much later. It is earned. You understand? He nodded. He was crying quietly, looking down at the table. I am sorry, he said, not the reflexive sorry of a man trying to escape consequences. Something slower than that. Something that sounded like it had been a long time waiting to come out. I let him talk me into believing there was an easy way. I knew it was wrong, and I kept going anyway. I told myself it was for your benefit, but it was never for you. I know that. I sat with that for a moment. Then I stood up. Angela will be here soon to take your formal statement, I said. Do the right thing, Daniel. I walked out without looking back. What happened next unfolded over the following weeks with the quiet momentum of a river that has finally been pointed in the right direction. Daniel testified. He gave Angela and the DA's office everything. The original plan, Gerald Hartman's role in forging Eleanor's signature, the arranged fake evaluations, the actor, the sedative, the documentation scheme. All of it in detail on the record. Sandra, watching her husband testify against her father, filed for divorce within a month and returned to her family's home. Gerald and Patricia Hartman faced multiple charges. Document forgery, attempted fraud, coercion, accessory to administering a controlled substance without consent. They did not receive prison sentences. Their attorneys were expensive and effective, but the fines were substantial, and the legal restrictions placed on their business activities significantly damaged the operation Gerald had spent years building. Word traveled through town the way it does in a small place, through the hardware store and the church pews and the Tuesday market, and the name Hartman stopped opening doors the way it once had. Daniel moved into a small apartment across town. With Pete's help, he found a job as an administrative assistant at the transport cooperative. Nothing glamorous, nothing easy, the kind of work where you have to actually show up and actually do it. He called once a month at first. Just brief calls. How are you? How is Mom? The weather has been strange. Small words that were really asking larger questions that were not yet ready to be asked directly. We did not rush any of it. There is something I want to tell you here, and I want you to sit with it for a moment. Have you ever loved someone so completely that their betrayal hurt, not just because of what they did, but because of who they once were to you? Have you ever had to hold justice and grief in the same two hands and figure out how to carry both without dropping either? Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Months passed. The visits became more frequent. Daniel never moved back in. He probably never will. Some bridges, when they break the way ours did, do not rebuild into the same shape. They become something different. Narrower maybe, more carefully crossed. But still there. The house remained ours, protected by the trust, protected by documents that bear both our names and the signatures of people who helped us when we needed it most. Angela, Frank, Pete, Mr. Sampson with his cameras and his quiet dependability. One evening in late spring, Eleanor and I were sitting on our small porch watching the light change over the rooftops of our neighborhood. She had a cup of tea. I had coffee. The street was quiet the way it gets just before dinner. Children called inside, the day settling into itself. She reached over and put her hand over mine. "You know what I keep thinking about," she said. "What, my love? All those years of laying bricks," she said softly. "You always told me that a house is only as strong as what holds it together underneath. The foundation." I nodded. "We are the foundation. Edward," she said. "Not the walls. Not the deed. Us." I turned my hand over and held hers. The air smelled like the sea, and someone nearby was cooking garlic, and the light was going orange and purple over the water in the distance. And I thought about everything. About the two people who had carried cement bags and ironed other people's clothes and worked double shifts and saved every dollar for 30 years to build something real. About the son who had nearly taken it all away and the long, uncertain road back from that. About the friends who had shown up without being asked. About the lawyer who had answered the phone before the sun came up. And about the woman sitting beside me who had been my anchor and my home long before we ever owned a single brick. Whatever they had tried to take from us, this was not something they could have reached. This was ours in a way that no document and no court and no scheme could have touched. Suffering builds character, Eleanor said, as if she had heard my thoughts. The important thing is what you build from it. What did we build? I asked her. She squeezed my hand. "This," she said simply. And she was right. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own table or your own home or someone you love, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for staying with me through every part of this. I mean that with everything I have.